Hello everyone, welcome back to the English Simplified channel. Today we're diving into the active participle phrase, specifically understanding it when placed in the middle and at the end of sentences. Are you ready? Let's begin. To ensure you grasp the concepts thoroughly, we'll answer these questions and wrap up with a summary. 1. What is an active participle phrase? 2. How do you form an active participle phrase? 3. Why and when should you use active participle phrases? 4. What do these sentences mean? 5. Summary and conclusion. Let's start with question number 1. What is an active participle phrase? An active participle phrase is formed by taking a base verb and changing it into its ing form, then adding any necessary modifiers or objects. This phrase acts like an adjective, providing more information about a noun or pronoun in the sentence. Now, moving on to question number 2. How do you form an active participle phrase? Here are the steps to create an active participle phrase in a sentence. 1. Identify the base verb. Choose the verb you want to use and change it to its ing form. 2. Add any necessary modifiers or objects. Include words like adverbs or direct objects that add meaning to the participle. 3. Attach it to the noun or pronoun it describes. Place the participle phrase next to the noun or pronoun it modifies. For example, the student working diligently on her project didn't notice the time. In this sentence, base verb, work, becomes working, modifiers, diligently on her project, attached to the student as noun or subject being described. Now you understand, right? Let's move on to question number 3. Why and when should you use active participle phrases? Active participle phrases can be used in 3 positions within a sentence. 1. At the beginning to set the scene or introduce background information. And we had already covered this in our previous discussion. 2. In the middle to provide more detail about the subject's actions or state. 3. At the end to add supplementary information or emphasize concurrent actions. Now let's delve into number 4. The meaning of sentences where active participle phrases are in the middle and at the end. Let's begin when an active participle phrase is in the middle of a sentence. When an active participle phrase is in the middle of a sentence, it typically follows the subject and provides additional information directly related to the subject's action or state. For instance, the student working diligently on her project didn't notice the time. Subject, the student active participle. Phrase, working diligently on her project. Main clause, the student didn't notice the time. Meaning, the phrase describes an ongoing action that explains why the student didn't notice the time. This sentence can also be rewritten using a relative clause. Let's see. Sentence using active participle phrase. The student working diligently on her project didn't notice the time. Sentence using relative clause. The student, who was working diligently on her project, didn't notice the time. In this sentence, the active participle phrase, working diligently on her project, can be rewritten using a relative clause, which becomes who was working diligently on her project. Meaning, the relative clause, who was working diligently on her project, provides additional information about the student, specifying what she was doing. This version implies that her diligent work is directly related to her not noticing the time. Let's consider another example. The teacher, explaining the complex topic, captivated the students. Subject, the teacher, active participle. Phrase, explaining the complex topic. Main clause, the teacher captivated the students. Meaning, this phrase describes how the teacher captivated the students, providing context to the main action. Again, let's rewrite this sentence using a relative clause. Sentence using active participle phrase. The teacher, explaining the complex topic, captivated the students. Sentence using relative clause. The teacher, who was explaining the complex topic, captivated the students. The active participle phrase, explaining the complex topic, can be rewritten using a relative clause, which becomes who was explaining the complex topic. meaning the relative clause provides additional information about the teacher's action, which contributes to captivating the students. Well, that is why, how, when, and the meaning of the sentence when an active participle phrase is in the middle of a sentence. By the way, what do you think about this sentence? The runner, pushing himself to the limit, won the race. What is the active participle phrase in this sentence, and can you rewrite this sentence using a relative clause? All right, now let's continue when an active participle phrase is at the end of a sentence. When an active participle phrase is at the end of a sentence, it follows the main clause and provides additional information about the action or state described in the main clause. This placement can add supplementary details, emphasize concurrent actions, or give context to the main action. See this example. She left the room, laughing at the joke. In this sentence, the main clause is she left the room. The active participle phrase is laughing at the joke. It follows the main clause. Meaning, this phrase describes an action, laughing, that occurs at the same time as the main action, leaving the room. This sentence can also be rephrased using a relative clause. See this. Sentence using active participle phrase, she left the room, laughing at the joke. Sentence using relative clause, she left the room, which was filled with laughter because of the joke. So as you see, the active participle phrase laughing at the joke can be rephrased using a relative clause, which becomes which was filled with laughter because of the joke. Here is one more example. He walked down the street, singing his favorite song. Main clause, he walked down the street. Active participle phrase, singing his favorite song. Meaning, the phrase describes an action, singing, that occurs at the same time as the main action, walking down the street. Let's rephrase this using a relative clause. He walked down the street, which echoed with the sound of his favorite song. Sentence using active participle. Phrase, he walked down the street singing his favorite song. Sentence using relative clause. He walked down the street, which echoed with the sound of his favorite song. So as you see, the active participle phrase singing his favorite song can be rephrased using a relative clause, which becomes which echoed with the sound of his favorite song. Well, before we make the summary and conclusion, think about this sentence. She entered the room carrying a tray of cookies. Try to analyze this sentence as we did before. Give your comment and I will gladly check it later. All right, this is our last discussion. 5. Summary or conclusion. Here's a summary and conclusion comparing active participle phrases placed in the middle and at the end of a sentence. Summary. When active participle phrase is in the middle of a sentence. Structure. The active participle phrase typically follows the subject of the sentence and provides additional information about the subject's action or state. Usage. It adds descriptive detail or context to the main clause, often specifying concurrent actions or circumstances. Example, the student working diligently on her project didn't notice the time. Rewritten structures can include relative clauses to convey the same meaning in different forms. When active participle phrase is at the end of a sentence. Structure. The active participle phrase comes after the main clause and provides supplementary information about the action or state described. Usage. It emphasizes the final detail or circumstance related to the main action, often describing concurrent actions or reasons for the main action. Example, she left the room laughing at the joke. Rewritten structures. Similarly, relative clauses can be used to rephrase the sentence while maintaining its meaning. Conclusion. The placement of the active participle phrase, whether in the middle or at the end of a sentence, affects how the sentence conveys information and emphasizes details. Middle placement tends to integrate the descriptive detail into the flow of the main action, while end placement highlights it as a concluding thought or circumstance. Both placements are effective in providing context and enriching the meaning of the main clause, offering flexibility in writing style and emphasis depending on the writer's intent and the context of the sentence. Finally, if you found this video helpful, please subscribe, like, comment, and share it with friends learning English. Your support means a lot to us. Thank you, and see you next time.